Insane new world eater for Minecraft Bedrock Edition. This crazy new flying machine can be built any size you want and will bomb out your entire world from build height to bedrock. If you want a giant hole in the ground, this is the machine for you. This TNT efficient design has a ton of great features like sweepers to automatically remove liquids, smart docking systems, a sky grid for max TNT efficiency, and it can be used in any dimension for mining out everything from farm perimeters to getting rid of the main end island. It might look complicated, but it's a surprisingly easy build to put together. You might wonder why anyone would need this. Well, simply put, it's for the mega builders among us who want to create full perimeters for max efficiency farms, lagless areas, high-tech builds, or for those of us who want to expose underground structures like ancient cities or strongholds without mining for months on end. Oh, and also the bragging rights. That's a pretty big feature of this build. This World Eater has 4 main features that make it incredibly good at its job. First of all, it has optional sweepers that you can add on to the bottom of the build. This will automatically clear all the water and lava that is in the area. That way you don't need to manually use sponges or something. It also has a smart docking system so that in case one of your flying machines gets stuck or breaks, the rest of them are not going to continue flying until you fix it. This prevents the system from breaking further. This system also uses a sky grid of the slabs and endstone, and this determines when and where your TNT gets dispensed and dropped. This allows us to create a highly efficient TNT layout, meaning that we get the maximum efficiency from our build. This also means it's an adjustable system, so if you run into a giant cavern or some place that you just don't need to bomb, you can modify your sky grid and save yourself some TNT. This is also an air burst TNT system, so the TNT explodes before it hits the ground, and because of physics, this is a much better way to explode things, like nuclear bombs. Just FYI. This insane build was designed by the mad lads at the Amalix Foundation, specifically Abstract Voxel, Luke, and Caleb. They spent a ton of time on this thing, and I love it. It's insane. You can find a link to their channels down below. If you've seen my Redstone Showcase videos, then you'll recognize the Amalix Foundations for some of the most insane tech on Bedrock Edition, and this is one of their newest contraptions. You can check out their Discord server linked down below, and that's also where you can find a world download so you can check out this build, mess around with it. Keep in mind that you can actually build just half of the system to make it significantly cheaper, simpler, and easier to build. So the entire lower section of slimestone that you see down here and the lower section on the far side is all optional. That is just for your sweepers to remove water and stuff. So if you pick a good build area, or if you're building in the nether or the end dimension, you just straight up do not need to build any of this, saving you a ton of resources and a ton of time. So how do you use this system and how does it work? Well, it's fairly straightforward, even though it looks a little bit messy. So we have 2 chests up here to actually control the system. These are trap chests to activate our pistons down below. If you open up this one, it's going to fire the system 1 time. However, if you open up the left one, that'll fire the system continuously. And you can also open up this one again to turn off the build. So once you open those up, that's going to activate a little bit of circuitry inside of that area, and then that'll activate all of your bombers. So this little section of the redstone right here is your actual bomber, where we have our TNT dispenser, and then we just have some more circuitry above and below that for timings and relaunching and moving it downwards. And then that entire section of redstone right there is just repeated over and over again until the system is as large as you want it to be. We also have quite a bit of delay in the system. That way it launches the sweepers later than the bombers. That way they don't get blown up. So let's go ahead and open up our chest real quick to fire the system for 1 cycle. So this is where you can see all the bombers get ejected right here. And then after a moment, all of our sweepers will also get launched, as you can see there. And then all the stuff behind is the docking and return systems. And this is where the sky grid comes into play. So as you can see, we have an observer down here that's going to power our TNT dispenser every time it goes past an endstone. This allows us to hold the TNT for just long enough on our little platform. That way it air bursts above the ground. This results in a much smaller system because you don't need all the additional slimestone required to have your sweepers at the very bottom and then have your TNT bombers like 100 blocks up. So this is how you can adjust where you have TNT falling. So if there was a giant cavern like over here in this corner, we could save some TNT by replacing the endstone temporarily until the rest of the area gets down to like the bottom of this cavern. So there are ways to save even more TNT on this build. And then we have the smart docking system on the return station. This uses a movable AND gate, which is really cool. So every single one of your flying machines needs to be docked and in place before that AND gate is complete, and then it relaunches your flying machines all at once, which is super cool. And of course, that prevents your system from breaking in case one of your sweepers gets stuck or one of your bombers doesn't return. Now, there is a caveat to using the water sweepers. You don't actually need to remove any of the liquids yourself. However, just due to the fact that we're using a TNT efficient design, sometimes when you have water or liquids, it can leave behind a few blocks that your sweepers might get stuck on. So occasionally you'll need to come in here, clean up a little bit and remove some blocks, but restarting these sweepers is really easy. You just put a torch on the back observer and that's going to send it back off to your docking system. And of course, the machine is not going to go anywhere until all of your sweepers have docked, so you don't need to worry about them getting blown up. But anytime that you see an aquifer pop up in your perimeter, you're going to have to babysit your sweepers a little bit. This is honestly pretty standard for any World Eater with sweepers, just because it's difficult to get all the blocks with TNT if you're trying to be even remotely efficient. And of course, a word of warning, this is a sensitive system, so if you log out of the game, leave the area, or crash while it's running, that's not going to be good. I would not recommend that under any circumstances. There is a small chance that you'll just be able to restart your flying machines and everything is fine, but like, there's a lot of TNT just kind of sitting around when it's running, so try not to do that. And of course, you need to keep this entire system loaded while it's running, so you cannot wander off. And if you decide to build a very large system, then you'll need to stand in the middle or follow your flying machines in order to keep the area loaded. If you build an extremely large system, then you'll need multiple players or a very large simulation distance in order to keep the entire machine loaded and prevent things from stopping on the edges. Now, obviously, this is Bedrock Edition. We do not have TNT duping, so you're going to want to get yourself a great shovel like this one and a huge desert like this one. Now, if you do need a ton of gunpowder, I do have a tutorial on an insane creeper farm from Mike Homer, and of course a couple of ghast farms that'll keep you in a steady supply of gunpowder. However, sand is really the big issue, and if you decide to build a sand duper or even just straight up dupe some TNT itself, then I'm not really gonna judge you. Java's got full-on TNT duping, so like, if you want to do some shenanigans to make it even, I don't really see a problem with that. If you like this kind of video, then make sure to drop a like and subscribe. This mega tutorial has taken me days to put together, but let's jump into the tutorial, starting with the materials that you'll need. You can build the system any size you like, so I can't tell you exactly how many resources you need, but this is everything used in a 12 bomber array with sweepers, and this is everything used in a 12 bomber array without sweepers. It's surprisingly cheap. Now, we do have to use endstone in this system for the grid and for the bombers. Otherwise, there's a chance that your system could break. Endstone has very high blast resistance. The slabs that you use in your grid should also have a high blast resistance, so we're just using some deep slate slabs. Step 1 of the tutorial is deciding where you want to have yourself a giant hole in the ground, and this is going to depend on what project you're doing. But if you're just kind of picking a random spot, I'd recommend picking somewhere relatively flat. That way you don't need to prep the area that much. And you should also do your research on what is going to be below the ground, so get yourself a copy of the world, put yourself into spectator mode, and take a peek underground with spectator mode to see what you're gonna get. So keep in mind that water caves can be very sneaky. This might not look like a water cave, but if we fly in here, it's completely full. So try to avoid water caves where you can, because it's gonna create a lot more work for you. If you decide to make your perimeter over a large cave, you can actually save yourself a lot of TNT just by adjusting your grid. Now, you also need to keep an eye out on the ground for sources of obsidian, because of course that is going to stop your flying machines if they run into it. Your main bombers are going to be about 9 blocks off the ground, so there's plenty of time for you to spot obsidian when it's inside your bombing range, but you still want to know what you're getting into. Now, once you've picked an area, you're going to want to do a little bit of surface prep, so I would get rid of all the trees in the area, and if for some reason you picked a really hilly zone, then you're probably going to want to flatten out that entire zone down to like the lowest area, so get it down to like, you know, Y66 or whatever the naturally lowest point is. That way you're not wasting TNT bombing out literally dirt. So as you can see, my build area is relatively flat, but we're actually going to be flattening it even a little bit more once we've installed the build. And now we need to decide where the actual flying machine itself is going to be going. So we're going to find the location of the brain, which is 5 blocks deep and 3 blocks wide. Now, you want to make sure that there's no chunk borders crossing this brain. So you can have one like on the edges of it, but you don't want a chunk border going through it this way because that could just cause all kinds of chaos. And please just don't do that to yourself. So as long as your brain is somewhere within the center of a chunk, you should be good. And now there's no reason why this build should be directional, but I'm going to be building it so that the bombers are going towards the west. So go ahead and get some marker blocks placed down for where you want your brain to be going. We're going to be building directly above this in a moment. But before that, we're going to mark out where the trench is going to be going. So we need to go 1 block back to the diagonal of it, and we need to go forwards by 13 blocks. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. So this trench is going to be going all the way down the length of your build. Now, you're not really going to know how long exactly that is right now until we get it built up. So just kind of mark out the general idea of how long your trench is going to be going. And we'll need to mine this down as far as you want your world eater to go. Now, you'll also need to mark this out on the back side of the build as well, so just go ahead and put in yourself a general outline of how long you think your flying machine is going to be. So again, you're going to be mining down on these marker blocks right here, not just on the inside, but actually down below the marker blocks themselves. So that's the area that you'll need to mine out just for the flying machine. Now, we also need a little bit of a trench on the left side right here. This is going to be 2 blocks wide, and this is going to be going all the way to the far side where you have your return stations. You're not going to know the exact location of your return stations yet until we install parts of the grid, but I would also mark in just a little temporary line. So go ahead and mark out your little temporary line of blocks to tell you where your 2 wide trench is going to be going, and you're going to want to flatten this entire zone. And now we're going to install the location of the return station brain. So that's going to be a 3 block wide area by 4 blocks long. Now our trench for this one is going to be starting again on that back corner, and it's going to be a total of 12 blocks wide, as you can see here. You're not going to know exactly how long your trench needs to be as of yet, but mark out generally how long you want it to be. So everything in between this line of blocks right here and this line of blocks on the front side is what your flying machine is actually going to bomb out and mine for you. Again, you can push this return station back way far if you want to, but if this is outside of your simulation distance, then you're going to have to follow your flying machines as they're bombing to prevent things from breaking, which might be a bit of a pain. And keep in mind that you can make this system basically as wide as you want as well. The one they're building on Amalex is like 400 blocks, so there's not really a limit. If you're going to be building a system with sweepers on it, it needs to be at least 10 to 11 sections long. So this section right here is 12 bombers. The reason why you need that extra length is just for the delay. That way your sweepers launch long enough after your bombers so that they don't get blown up. Your system is also going to go a little bit faster if you don't have the sweepers, because you won't need to wait for them to all dock on the far side. So your bombers will return sooner. And now we're going to start actually building the brain. So go to your 3x5 layout of blocks. We're going to start on the side towards our return station side and place in ourselves a solid block above the ground. We're going to go up by a total of 6 blocks right here. This is the minimum height of your first sticky piston and the bottom of your brain. However, I'd recommend that you give yourself a couple extra blocks of room in here. So I'm going to place our first sticky piston 8 blocks off the ground. That way we can test the brain a couple times. So on top of this piston, we're going to go up by a total of 6 slime blocks right here. And then we need another sticky piston going up. We need a little L shape of slime right here like so. And on top of this is where your 2 trap chests to actually control the system are going to go. Below that, we need 2 more sticky pistons facing forwards and a sticky piston facing downwards like so. We're going to place in an upper slab right here. And then we just need a little platform of slime blocks in here for that piston to kind of sit on. I'd put a couple blocks above your chest so that way you don't open them mid-build and break something. But now we're going to put in a redstone block right there. We're going to go back to the bottom of this pillar real quick and install the redstone down here. So we're going to go over by 3 slime blocks like so, a slime block up, and then we need a couple of temporary blocks because there needs to be an observer facing upwards right there. We also need an observer facing upwards right there as well. Now we need an upper slab beside that observer right there and a regular piston facing downwards. So now flip around to the back side of this. We're going to install a sticky piston right here, observer looking to the left of this build right there, and then 4 slime blocks in this little L shape. So now 2 redstone blocks right there, and a regular piston facing upwards by that redstone block. So this is actually going to be the docking station for one of your bombers. Now put in a pillar of 4 temporary blocks right here. We're going to go down to the bottom of this. We need a regular piston facing downwards right here at the bottom of the pillar, 1 at the top of the pillar, and then in between these 2, we're going to put in ourselves a sticky piston facing upwards. Remove the entire pillar of temporary blocks. We need a redstone block right there to power that top piston. Observer facing away from the build. Now go to the top of the build, and we're going to place an observer right here facing towards the return stations. So now we're wrapping up the brain. We're going to put ourselves a sticky piston upwards right there, 4 slime blocks going to the right, and then you need an observer upwards right here, and a regular piston below it like so. Now we're going to get ourselves an observer facing downwards next to that sticky piston. Looping around, we need a downwards piston right here, an upwards observer, and then we need another upwards observer, a block to the diagonal of it like so. We need a slime block underneath that observer, sticky piston facing upwards, and then another slime block. And now we need a sticky piston upwards right here, a slime block right there, 2 solid blocks on the face of it like so, and then a downwards piston. And to complete the brain, all you need to do is place in an observer right here facing to the right, and now we can actually test out the brain if you want to, which I would recommend. So remove one of our extra temporary blocks from down below. We now have a 7 block pillar, and all you need to do to test the brain is open up this chest right here. That should activate the entire thing and push it all down, and your bottom pistons should be stacked up like this, as you can see here. So if this piston is a block over to the right, you just go ahead and open up your first chest again to bring it back to middle. And now what we need to do to fully reset this thing is simply lower this piston down by a block manually and put that slab back above it like so. And now just go ahead and activate this observer with a temporary block, and that should pull down the rest of your things. And now everything should be at the exact location that I showed you how to build it, but it's going to be 1 block lower than it was previously. So if anything is broken or weird or out of place, then triple check your build and make sure it's correct, because I know this is some pretty compact slimestone. So good news, that's basically the most complicated part of the build. Everything else from here on out is basically identical sections of slimestone. So once you've built it one time, you pretty much know how to build it as many times as you need, which is going to make this tutorial a lot easier to record. We're going to tack a few pieces onto the brain, so put in yourself a sticky piston going upwards right there, and then 3 slime blocks to the right like so. Go down to the bottom, we need 2 more slime blocks, and then an observer facing upwards right here. So now it's time to build our first bomber. So I'm going to show you how to build the bomber one time, and all of the other ones are exactly identical. Now they're all going to be lined up on these vertical extended pistons right here, and we're always going to start with an observer. So place in that observer, we need a couple of slime blocks above it like so. Now turn around, we need our TNT dispenser to go right here, and then an optional hopper above this. So if you're doing really long runs, you can stock up your hopper with more TNT. That way you don't need to restock this as often. Anyway, we're going to go around to the back side of this now. We need an observer facing downwards right there, sticky piston facing towards the back of the build, with an observer facing to the right there, and then a sticky piston right there. And now we need 1 redstone block right there, so that when this entire segment moves down, it powers that piston and pushes your machine down. So that is the front of your bomber done. And for the back of the bomber, we need 2 temporary blocks in right here, 2 slime blocks going out. We're going to break out our temporary blocks, put in a sticky piston facing forwards right there, and 1 right there. We need a couple more temporary blocks in at this location. Get around to this side of the build, and we're going to place in 2 observers facing those temporary blocks. Now you can go ahead and break those out. That'll activate the piston. It's fine. You can place another slime block in right there. Now we need to go down on this corner, place an observer facing upwards, sticky piston facing downwards, and a piece of endstone on the front of that. So that is the back of your bomber done. I'd recommend testing your bomber after you've built it just to make sure that everything is good. So place in a torch right underneath that observer right there, and you should place a piece of obsidian out on the range somewhere. That way it'll run into it. So as you see, it's all working perfectly fine. We don't have the grid installed yet, so it's not going to drop any TNT. And then once it runs into that, it should look like this. Now, you can actually just return this back to its little station by placing in another torch right there, and it should just go back the other direction, which is super cool. And once it gets back to the station, it should be exactly as you built it. As you can see, everything is perfect. And now we're going to build the lower extension arm and docking station. So we're going to start off of this observer right here, place a sticky piston facing upwards right there, observer facing that piston, and then we need 3 slime blocks going out the back of it, and another observer facing upwards right there. And that is actually the end of our extension. So now we need 2 slime blocks right there, redstone block right there, and then go to the front of the build. We need a sticky piston facing upwards and a normal piston above that. So this is the docking station for your next bomber. As you can see, it is identical. Your prime observer, this one right here, would just be touching that piston. So that is 1 module and 1 docking station. You can build as many of these as you want going down to the end of the build. And to do that, you just simply start right here at the next location. So it's just going to be another sticky piston going up, another observer facing that, another 3 slime blocks, and then you kind of get the idea. Each one of these is exactly the same, and you just keep stitching them together going down the line, and you'll need 1 of these per bomber that you want to cover your area. And now for the upper extension arm, this is going to be pushing your bombers downwards. So we already have the beginning of this extension, actually. It's just your sticky piston and 3 slime blocks. We're going to be going over on that with a solid block right here, observer facing upwards, and then 2 slime blocks below that, and we need a regular piston facing downwards. So that is actually the end of this module. The next one will be sticking onto the end of it. And we need in ourselves a temporary block right here, observer facing upwards underneath that, observer facing upwards on the side of that. You can remove your block. We need a slime block underneath that, slime block right here. Now we can go up. We need a sticky piston facing upwards down there, another one right there, slime block above that, 2 solid blocks right here, and then our piston facing downwards below it. So this little section of redstone should be identical to this section of redstone, because guess what? It's the same exact thing that's going to be pushing your flying machine downwards. So that's 1 module of your upper extension arm. So the next one is going to be sticking right onto the end of this. So it would just be a sticky piston right there, and then you get your 3 solid blocks over and your solid block right there. And it's basically the exact same build process as this one. You just stick it on the end as many times as you want going down the line. And now a little tip for you guys building in cold biomes or places that it can snow. You're going to want to get a snow shield in here before anything goes terribly wrong with all these observers activating from snow layers. So a snow shield is really just going to be any layer of glass or slabs or solid blocks above this machine. I'd recommend making it the same width as the machine, and then it's just going to go all down the length of this thing. That way no snow lands on your observers and activates your thing and kind of breaks everything. So go ahead and fill that in. So now you know how to expand your standard system going as far as you want on this thing. It's just going to be a whole bunch of these lower arms, the bomber, and a whole bunch of these upper arms all tied together. There's nothing special once you get to the end, except on the very last one, you can chop off those 2 blocks in the observer because it's not actually necessary. So now you have the job of building as many of these as you want to make your system as long as you want. So I just installed our second bomber right there. That way we can install the grid over the bombing range. So we're going to start by placing in a temporary block underneath our dispenser. So we already have the slab right there. That counts as 1. We need 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then once you get out to the end, you should be using your deep slate slabs and end stone. It's going to be 1 slab, end stone, 2 slabs, a spacer block, and then you just repeat that process going all the way down the line until you have reached your little bar for your return station over there. And now we need to do the second bomber. This is going to have a different set of spacings on it. So we're going to place in our block underneath our dispenser. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And now you start placing in those same little stretches of blocks. So it's slab, end stone, 2 slabs, and a gap, and you just keep on repeating this process going all the way down the line. So all of your odd bombers are going to have an 8-block gap, so, you know, bomber number 1, 3, 5, and 7, and all of your even bombers, bombers 2, 4, 6, and 8, are going to have that 6-block gap. And make sure to remove all the filler blocks in your grid, because that's where your TNT falls down. So you're just going to install your grid until your even numbers gets in line with the edge of your trench. So this is basically what it's going to look like for me. Now, yours is probably going to vary a little bit, but in general, you want your last slab right here to be above the line of your trench. So you might have to move this little platform in by a couple blocks. You might have to push it out by a couple blocks. Now is the time to check check all that out. So we're gonna go to the grid marker from our first bomber, and we're gonna go out by 9 blocks from this one right here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 9. And this should actually line up with the very edge of where you have the marker for your brain. And now we're going to build up the brain for the return station over here. So we're going to go up into the diagonal of this bar right here with an observer. Place in yourself a piston facing downwards, 2 slime blocks below those. Now we need a slime block here and 3 going across like so. Now we're going to need ourselves an observer facing away from the system right there, and another piston facing downwards like so. Go ahead and get yourself in 2 more slime blocks down like that. And now we need a couple of temporary blocks going down, so just 3 in a pillar like this. Remove those 2 middle ones. We need an observer facing downwards on that block, sticky piston facing upwards above it. You can remove that block, and all of that should fire and be fine. Now we're going to place in 4 more slime blocks in these locations right here. Now a redstone block in the middle, a sticky piston facing upwards right there with another redstone block on it, slime block there and there. To finish this up, we're going to place in a regular piston facing downwards right there. We're going to place a sticky piston off of the side of that one, a redstone block right there, regular block right there, and then a slab above it. So this should all be good to go right now. I'd recommend that you place a block in front of that observer. That's going to move the entire thing down a block, as you can see. And now it's actually at the correct level to receive your bombers. So you do have to test it. I recommended it, but it's actually mandatory. Before we build up more of this, if you're in a snowy biome, I'd recommend that you install a snow shield. It's just going to be 3 blocks wide, covering up the entirety of the build, except like this couple little blocks right there. And it just needs to go down the entire length of where you're going to have return stations. And now we're going to build up the lower extension arm. This is going to detect when all of your bombers have docked in. That way it can relaunch them all. So we're going to place in a redstone block next to that sticky piston right there. And then we need a couple of slime blocks. Go out with 3 temporary blocks. Remove those 2 middle ones. We need a sticky piston right there. A redstone block on the side of it like so. Remove your temporary block. We need a block right there and then a slab above it. So that is one module of this thing done. The next one's going to be going in right next to it. So it's going to be a redstone block, couple of slime blocks, and then it's the exact same build process going out. So you're going to have to build up one of these for each bomber that you have on your main system. And now it's time for the upper extension arm. This is what actually catches and sends back your flying machine. So we're going to be putting an observer facing upwards right there, slime block underneath it with a sticky piston facing upwards right here, 4 slime blocks going over, and that should line up with your block and slab over there. Now we need in a slime block right here, piston facing downwards right there, 2 slime going over, and then an observer facing that slab. Now we also need to place in a solid block right here, and that's what's actually going to stop your flying machine. That way it doesn't just run into the rest of the arm. So again, this is one little module. The next one's going to be going on the very end of this, so it's just going to be an observer right there, slime underneath it, sticky piston going up, and then a bunch of slime going out. And it's the exact same build process as what I just showed you right there. Now, very importantly, do not update this observer when you are building once you've placed it in, because that's just going to clock your redstone, and it's just going to be kind of like that, and you don't really want that. If it does happen, you have to break out that slime block and put it back. So if you have a bunch of these tiled together, they're all going to start clocking like that. So really try to avoid it. So you're just going to keep on building up these modules until you reach the very end. Once you do reach the very end, you need to make sure that you have that block installed. So typically your slime is only going to go out to where your slab is, but you're going to need an extra block right there, slime block below it, and then that extra block to actually stop your flying machine on your very end module of your return station. So once you have your return station built up, you're technically ready to go for another dry test of this system. So we have our bombers set up. All of this system has already been verified. We can go ahead and remove the extra block that we have down there, and then open up our chest, and then bring our piston back to that location. So we have successfully launched our bombers, and you can see that they are pushing down our grid by a block, which is exactly right. And now we just need to wait for them to get to the return station. And once they get over here, they should run into the block that you placed. And once both of them have docked, they should get relaunched by the system here. Your entire slime contraption should move down a block, and these are going to go back and dock at the main station over there. And as you can see, they have successfully docked, and the rest of our machine has moved down correctly. So now we have a fully functioning world eater, although it's very small right now, but you have all the resources and knowledge necessary to build this up and make a very large world eater to be whatever size that you want. Again, all this redstone is very modular, so it's just a whole bunch bunch of very small pieces stuck together. Honestly, it's very close to Lego. In typical tutorial jump cut style, we now have an entire array of these things. So this is 12 bombers, just to give you an idea of what a full-size system would look like. Of course, you can make it longer, you could make it shorter, whatever you want to do. And then we have a whole bunch of these return stations built up, and it's all very standard and very similar to what you've already seen. We just have a bunch of them tiled together. So when we launch these, each one of them is going to have a little bit of delay than the one before. So we're going to get this kind of nice wave effect. And this is just generally what's going to happen with them. I would recommend that you do a full scale test before you put any TNT in there, just to make sure that things are good to go. And we should see them all dock. Once the final one has, then they're going to get relaunched. Once the full system is in place, you need to go to the far right side of it right here. I'm going to go out by a block, and this is where the edge of your trench is going to be going. And then, of course, we need to extend that into a one wide trench connecting up to the far side over here, as you can see. And that's to make sure that no extra blocks get grabbed by the flying machines or any issues like that. So now it's time that you start digging out these trenches, going as far down as you want your bomber to go. So if you want this array to bomb out to Bedrock, well, then you're going to need to dig this trench basically to Bedrock. Now, you only need to dig out the left side trench and the right side trench if you're going to be installing the sweepers. And of course, you need to mine out this entire one for the return station as well. Jumping to another one of my worlds, as you can see, this is basically what your trench is going to look like once you have all of these things installed. We're basically just trimming out an entire rectangle around this thing. That way we have a solid square in the middle that we can bomb out. Which, you know, might seem a little bit ridiculous, but you're the one that wanted to build a world eater. Now, a pro tip for those of you who are using this thing, you can do some math to figure out how much TNT each one of these is going to use per layer. So just count how many end stones you have in your grid, and then that'll be how much you're using per layer. And then you can multiply that until you have like 9 stacks or whatever. And then you know that, like, once your world eater gets down to this layer, you'll need to check your dispensers and restock them with TNT. And now you have a fully functioning world eater in your Minecraft world. So if you want to add on the sweepers, then keep on watching and I'll show you how to add on those so you can automatically clear liquids. But if you don't care about that, then technically you're good to go. So thank you so much for watching this video. Drop a like, share it around, and subscribe because you just watched a mega tutorial. But otherwise, let's hop into the tutorial for how to add these sweepers on. First thing that we need to do to add on the sweepers is go to your brain, and we're going to go underneath of this redstone block right here, placing yourself a solid block. We need a piston facing downwards, redstone block next to it, and then an observer facing towards that direction. We need to go down with a couple of temporary blocks and then another piston facing downwards, break out that temporary and put in a sticky piston facing upwards. So it should look just like that. Now we're going to place in a couple of slime blocks right here. We need an observer facing upwards, slime block underneath it, and then a sticky piston facing upwards underneath it, like so. So that's what you should have underneath of this little redstone block, and now break out your temporary. And now we're going to go over and make this a 4-block long bar of slime with a solid block on the end. So this is going to be the timing circuit that adds delay to your sweepers so they don't get blown up. And again, this is a modular system, so we need to tack on a bunch more of these going to the end of your bombing array. So at the end of this right here, we're going to put in a sticky piston facing upwards, slime block right there, observer facing upwards, and then a bar of 4 slime blocks going out with another solid block on the end. So this is the timing for your sweepers. So we need to build 10 of these in total, meaning that it should go to your 10th bomber in your system. Then we're going to connect it to the main machine. So this is the 10th module that you should have built up with a little solid block on the end. Instead of continuing that all the way to the end of the machine, we're going to connect this in to the observer underneath our 10th bomber. So to do that, all you got to do is place in yourself a sticky piston next to your solid block and a slime block right there. So that's how you tie this timing circuit into the main circuit for your bombers. And now we're going to build the launchers for our sweepers. So we need to place in a couple of temporary blocks beneath that piston right there. We need an observer facing upwards and another one next to it, 2 slime blocks below it, and 2 more slime blocks going out. That should reach your pillar. We're going to remove a bit of that right now. We need an observer facing upwards. That should be underneath your first piston that you placed. And now we need a piston underneath that, solid block right there, and a sticky piston facing upwards on the side of that block. So now we need in some glazed terracotta. This has to be glazed terracotta. You can't use anything else. And it needs to be 5 of them in this exact shape right here. And to finish off our launcher, we're going to place in a regular piston facing downwards right there. So that is one launcher for your build. Now you need to module this together. So to do that, you're going to start with a sticky piston facing upwards right here, 4 slime blocks going out, and then your 2 observers to repeat this process are going to be going right here on the end. So just keep on rebuilding that, going all the way down the line. So here's our second module put together, and as you can see, it's exactly the same as what we built over here. Now there should be a 4 block gap between these modules, of course. So now we're going to go up to our beginning piston where we started, remove your 2 temporary blocks, and place in 2 slime blocks right here and a redstone block, and that's just to activate this little engine. So now to build the sweeper, we're going to start at the bottom of our layer of glazed terracotta. We need to place an observer facing downwards right there, and then a bar of 4 honey going across, and 1 more honey right there. Grabbing yourself a sticky piston, place it facing towards your observer, and another one right there. Now we're going to place an observer right here, and 1 right there facing to the right. And then you just need to place in yourself 2 solid blocks underneath your 2 honey blocks on the edge right there. So that is going to be the front part of your sweeper. Now we need the back section. So we're going to go out by 4 temporary blocks right here. We need a sticky piston facing towards the other one, observer facing downwards. Remove your temporary blocks. Now place in yourself a solid block right here. 3 slime going across the top of it like so. Another slime block above that piston. Observer facing away from the build. And then we need in a sticky piston right here. And that is the back of your flying machine. So you can go ahead and test this if you want. You just need to place a torch on this front observer right here. And that should make the thing fly out. And then if it ever runs into a block, it is going to stop. And to, you know, make it fly again, you can either update this observer or this one to, you know, make it go either direction. And now it is back in its bay. So you need to build up one of these at every pillar of your terracotta. And once you have multiple of these installed, they should be perfectly lined up with one another. There shouldn't be any gaps or overlap between the 2 flyers. And on your very last flyer in the system, this bar is actually going to get extended by 1 block. But that's only for the very last one. And that's everything you need to know to build up all of your sweepers and the infrastructure for it on your launch side, but now we need to install the return stations. So go to the back side of the brain on the return station. We're going to place an observer facing upwards right here with a slime block next to it, and then a regular piston facing downwards right there. Now we need 2 regular blocks right there, and then 2 glazed terracotta, another regular block underneath that, redstone block right here, and then you'll have to mine out some of the ground because we need another redstone block to the diagonal. Above that, we need a sticky piston facing upwards with a honey block above that one, and then 3 solid blocks going up, and you should have this general shape. And now we're going to place in a sticky piston right here with a redstone block to the side of it, like so. We need a solid block above it, and then a slime block right there. Now we're going to place a piston facing downwards off the side of that honey, and an observer facing to the side of it, just like so. Loop around to the back side of this. We need to place in a sticky piston facing upwards, a couple of slime blocks right there, and then we need a piston facing downwards with a block underneath it. It's a bit complex, but that is what it should look like. And now on this corner, we need a slime block right here with an observer facing that, a honey block above it right next to the other honey block, and then 2 solid blocks on the edges like so. So this is the docking station and the brain for your lower return station, and this is actually going to catch your first sweeper. So now we need to build up the next one, and you guessed it, all of these are going to be modular and exactly the same, and you're going to want to dig out a little bit of your trench because you need some building room down here to actually put this together. So we're going to start off with a redstone block right here, 2 slime blocks going out, and then 3 temporary blocks. That way we can get in a sticky piston right here. We need a redstone block to the side of it to actually power that. Now put in a solid block above that and 1 right here. We need a couple of temporary blocks right here. That way we can place in a regular piston facing downwards. So that is 1 module of your lower AND gate to actually check that all of your sweepers have arrived before relaunching. So you just need to build up a whole bunch of these going all the way to the very end, and it just repeats itself. So the next redstone block is going to be going right here, your 2 slime blocks, your 3 temporary blocks, and you kind of get the idea. That is how you install those going all the way down the line. So that's just the lower AND gate. You need the actual upper activation and docking station for this. So we're going to place out a slime block right here lined up with your first redstone block. Now we need an observer facing upwards, slime block underneath that, sticky piston facing upwards, and then just go over with 3 slime until you're above that piston. remember to place in yourself a solid block right there. That's what actually catches your flying machine and returns it. And now we're going to place in ourselves an observer facing to the left right there, and a regular piston facing downwards right there to send down your AND gate. So that is one module of this build. The next ones are just going to be stitched onto the end exactly like so. So your next redstone block would be going right here, of course, and then you need to have in your next slime block. Your next observer would be right here, and so on and so forth. It's the exact same build process going all the way down the line. And let's see what this all looks like once you've built it up. So we have all of our sweepers in station, and as you can see, all of them are identical to one another. There's really not too much to say about it. Of course, the end one has that one extra block on the very end there. And of course, our right trench is going to be lined up to the right of that sweeper as well. That way it doesn't grab anything while it's flying. And going back to the brain side, as you can see, our left side trench is going to be lined up with the honey blocks right here. So we're going to be mining out these blocks going down. Now, all of your return stations are identical going all the way to the very end of them. So you don't need to worry about anything. Of course, now you need to actually start mining out your trenches going down. That way we have some room for a test fire. And keep in mind that your flying machines will go down a block when you activate the system. So you can't have any blocks underneath them, or you might activate them like that as well accidentally. If you do, you can always just send them back into the station. But yes, make sure that you remove all the blocks underneath them, and you'll also need to flatten out this area. If there is a block out here, that is going to stop your sweepers until we've actually stocked up our bombers. So I went ahead and mined out a couple of layers in all of our trenches just so we have some room to do a dry test of this thing. So once again, go ahead and open up your trap chest for a second, retract that piston, and we should see all of our bombers go active. And then after a moment, that should go ahead and activate all of our sweepers, as you see from that little piece of redstone going. And now we have just a very noisy machine. So if at any point one of these guys does end up stopping, that's actually fine. Your system is built to be able to withstand that. And again, you can just remove the blocks that are blocking them, and you can restart them by updating that observer. So all of our bombers are going to dock, and that is going to activate the AND gate on the back of them, as you can see, starting at the very end over there. A beautiful thing indeed. And then our AND gate at the bottom is also going to update for all of our sweepers. There it goes. The final one docks in, and then all of them get relaunched. And once we have done this test, we know the system is fully functioning, so we can actually put some TNT into our dispensers and start bombing. And now for the moment of truth, we've stocked the thing with TNT. We're going to do another little tester run of this, and as soon as our bombers get to the end stone, it shouldn't blow up. I mean, it should, but it shouldn't. So as you see, we got our TNT, and it should just start dropping down, and now the sweepers are going to start going. But yeah, everything is looking good. All of our blocks are getting removed. And that is our World Eater with sweepers completely done and dusted. If you enjoyed this video, then drop a like, share it around, and subscribe for more Bedrock tech. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you down in the comments and in the next one.